Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the story about Naruto. What if Naruto was descendant of dragon? Part 12, the last part. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please do support for more awesome content and also hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends and also support the creator of this fanfic. I have created many playlists, check it out in the channel. So let's start the video. In the Uzumaki clan fortress, Kin and Fenrix looked at the young man being brought in by the Anbu and escorted by Naruto, Temari, Sakura, Sasuke, Hinata, Tsunade, and Hana, as well as Shizune and Kakashi. The group was guided by Kin to one of the rooms, and there they placed the youth into the room and on the bed. Once that was done, Tsunade explained the situation with Fenrix, and the senior ascendant nodded an agreement for the time being with the idea of having the young man stay within the fortress. Of course, Hokage-sama, we will shelter him here until he fully recovers. Once he does, we will send word to you as quickly as possible. Tsunade smiled at that and replied, "My thanks. In the meantime, I have to return to my work in the tower, so I hope that we can get some good news about our young guest." With that, the Hokage, Shizune, and the Anbu took their leave, while Kakashi spoke once more. "Well, at any rate, we have a mystery in our hands on this young man, so at the moment, I'll have to cut the training short for now. We'll get back to the training once we're done, though I have a feeling that since the village is short-handed, I will be called off for either patrol work or assignments." Fenrix then spoke to Kakashi. "Before you leave, Kakashi-san, there is a matter that I believe we should be discussing." Kakashi was curious about that and decided to follow Fenrix to another room to allow the dragon ascendant to tell him what was on his mind. As the pair moved to the main hall, Fenrix then spoke his mind concerning Sasuke, namely on Sasuke's request to train under him. Kakashi was curious about that and why Sasuke would ask that from Fenrix himself. It was not that he thought that Fenrix had plans for Sasuke, the being was a trustworthy sort, but he already had his hands full on teaching Naruto how to be an ascendant like him, so why this? This left Naruto and the others with time on their hands, and it was here that Temari decided to speak to Naruto. "By the way, Naruto?" "Yes, Temari-san? You and I need to train for a while, and I want to see just how strong you really are you alright with that?" Naruto thought it over while Hana then spoke to them. "If you guys have that in mind, I am going to go to my clinic and get some work done. I have no doubt that I have a lot of work to take care of with my patients." Naruto nodded as Hana left with her canine familiars, and it was here that Hinata asked to train alongside Temari and Naruto. The blonde shinobi thought that it was a good idea, as he could also use the training he had gotten from Hinata in a more serious battle. This also meant that Sasuke and Sakura had time on their hands. Sasuke thought it over and decided to go and head back home, while Sakura decided to head off to meet her parents and handle some of the chores back at home. As for Kakashi and Fenrix, the two were currently talking about Sasuke's desire to learn from the Dragon Ascendant. Kakashi was surprised by that and was curious what techniques and skills Fenrix could teach Sasuke. "How do you plan to teach Sasuke, Fenrix-san?" "There are certain techniques that I can teach Sasuke. These techniques do not need the user to be an ascendant like me and Naruto, and while it will take a while, it follows the same level of training that ninjas would use. Think of my training to be similar to that of your Chidori training, but do not use hand seals." Kakashi raised his eyebrow at that and replied, "That sounds rather interesting. Is there anything else that you can be training him with?" "Yes, there is, as he has a Kekkai Genkai, then some of the techniques I will teach him may have an effect on it. I also have a feeling that you yourself can learn it, even though you do not own the Sharingan that you have. However, you have made your own way, so I believe that it is up to you if you will allow me to train Sasuke." "I see, let me train him for as long as I can, and when I am done, you can train him. But I have to ask, what can you train him in?" "Apart from techniques and skills, I plan to teach him what it means to fight for something more important than simply avenging his family." "And what is that?" "The future. If he succeeds in killing his brother Itachi, Sasuke is the last of the Uchiha. He has to find something that can fill him with a purpose once he no longer has a reason to hate and rage over. To teach him to look beyond the desire and need for revenge is what I want to do. Do you agree with me on this, Kakashi?" Jonin was silent and nodded at that, as he could not help but see that Fenrix had a point. Sasuke needed to find a purpose and goal if he did succeed in his desire to avenge his family. There was more to life than revenge and battle, He knew that to be true himself, as he had worked hard to be where he was after all the things that had happened to him ever since becoming an adult. I guess I have to admit that I worry about Sasuke after that encounter with Itachi, and what would the results be? I can only hope that he does not allow himself to be turned to the side of darkness. If you can help him in any fashion, then I am all for it. It was not long before the young man recovered. At least a few hours, Ayam had been in the fortress to cook some food for Naruto's guest. When it was she who noted that he was awake, she placed the food near the table and moved out of the room and called out to Naruto once she found them. The blonde head of the Uzumaki clan was busy working with training alongside Temari and Hinata for a while now. Once she was able to get their attention, Naruto, Temari, and Hinata made their way to the room, and when they were all in, the man was now fully awake as he was sitting up on the bed and looking around to figure out where he was at this very moment. Naruto was the very first person to speak. "Are you all right?" The blonde youth looked at Naruto and nodded slowly, and then he spoke as well. "Yes. Where am I?" Naruto then replied to that. "You are in my home. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. What's your name?" The young man looked at Naruto, and it was here that he spotted Temari and Hinata who were walking into the room. He raised an eyebrow a bit and looked back at Naruto. "Who are they?" Naruto looked at where the guy was looking and blushed a bit and replied with some reluctance, as he was still trying to wrap his brain around the fact that the women in question were going to be his wives at a later date. "They are Hinata Hyuga and Temari, and they are very important people to me." Hinata blushed at that and could understand that Naruto was still trying to process the fact that he was soon going to be married to not just her, but Temari and Hana. Temari on the other hand was a bit more direct, and even though she could understand her fiancé's reluctance due to their age, she was not going to hide it. "Actually, we're his fiancés." Naruto blushed deeply at this and was unable to say anything, and that allowed the recovering man to widen his eyes and looked seriously at the three people in his room. Just as Ayam walked in, she too was a bit shocked at this, but decided to wait a bit more to see just what was going to be Naruto's answer on the man's possible question on that bit of information. She and the others did not have to wait for long as the young man spoke. "Aren't you a bit young for that?" Naruto tried to come up with an excuse, and Hinata decided to clarify things first. "It's kind of complicated, but we are going to marry Naruto-kun soon. He is the head of this household and this clan after all." If anything, that made the young man look at Naruto in surprise, and he replied, "Aren't you a little too young to be a clan head?" That only served to make Naruto even more annoyed and a bit more embarrassed, as he said nothing at first, and after a minute or more of silence, he replied, "It's complicated, suffice to say, Temari-san is right, and you are in my home. Do you remember what happened back in the hospital?" The young man nodded, and Naruto then decided to try asking the young man's name. It was a bit odd for sure to be asking him, since he was supposed to be an amnesiac, but there was no sense in not trying. The young man looked at the blonde seriously and then began to slowly shake his head side by side. "I don't know, I honestly don't remember the name." It was here that Naruto looked at a bowl of the ramen that Ayam had made earlier for their guest and got an idea from looking at one of the food items that made his favorite food. "I have an idea. Would it be alright if I give you a temporary name until you remember your real one?" The young man said nothing for a moment and then smiled at Naruto and spoke. "Alright then, so what do you want my name to be?" Naruto scratched his head a bit and replied, "Okay, I know this might sound weird and all, but is the name Menmo alright with you?" The blonde-haired youth was a bit surprised at the name, and it was Temari who could not help but find the name a bit amusing as she spoke to Naruto, as she knew what that name meant. "You want him to carry the name of a food item, Naruto?" Naruto looked at Temari and replied a bit in slight annoyance. "My name also means fish cake apart from Maelstrom Temari-san, so I don't really see why it's a bad idea. Besides, I don't know any other names right now." Temari looked at her husband, and she could see that he was somewhat offended by what she had said and had to admit that he was right about his own name. She decided to reply to that in a tone of apology, since she had to admit that making fun of another person's name was uncalled for at times and hardly a good way to make an impression. And he was a guest in their house after all. "Alright, I apologize for that, Naruto. I just never expected that for a name choice." Naruto sensed that Temari was sincere about her apology and accepted it. "It's alright, Temari-san. Anyway, is that name alright with you?" The man looked at him and the others and soon gave a nod. Naruto was pleased and decided to make sure that when he had free time, he would speak to Tsunade about the name he had given his guest and also ask for him to remain in the Uzumaki clan fortress until he was fully recovered and had his memories back. It had been a bit of a hard few days, as the young man, now known to the others, as Menma began to recover, periodically Tsunade would send over some medic nin to see to the recovery progress of Menma and make sure that he had no other condition from his ordeals both from the river and then from the hospital fire that he had been in. Those were usually watched by Fenrix and Kakashi, as well as a squad of Anbu who were more than willing to handle those duties if needed. As soon as he was back on his feet and fully healthy, Menma worked on doing small odd jobs all over Konoha to show that he was able to contribute. This helped him build something of a positive reputation to the elders of Konoha, as well as the citizenry. Naruto himself was more than willing to help Menma in doing those very same tasks, even though he was not supposed to. Tsunade and Shizune were pleased by that, and when Jiraiya come back every now and then, he would also look over the whole situation as well. They were a bit amused by the name, but since the young man did not seem to mind being given the name by Naruto, they agreed to it, and so far, Menma was going well. That however did not mean that they were not going to be wary, as they usually made sure to have Kakashi check on the young man. Kakashi managed to take some time away from missions to train alongside his students and devoted some time to Naruto, and the blonde appreciated the training. Kakashi might be late, as usual for those sessions with Naruto, but he made sure to keep the training interesting every now and then. Fenrix himself was around to teach Naruto as well, befitting the fact that the two of them were the same due to the powers they possessed. As for the others, it seemed that Kin had developed a bit of a shine to the young man, as when he was not working, they were usually talking to one another and hanging out. Tsunade made sure to check on that, as Kin was a former sound kunoichi, namely to see if she had any idea if Mama was a spy for Orochimaru. Kin in those meetings replied that she had not sensed anything wrong with Menma, and she was not aware of anyone in the force she was with matching Menma. Plus the personality he had did not match anyone in sound, as far as she knew, though she admits that she would be watchful, even though she herself found the man to be rather nice, and certainly someone she did not mind at all to be around with. As for Naruto himself, the young clan head was getting used to being in the situation that he was in right now. His relationships with Hinata, Hana, and Temari were improving bit by bit, though so far, much to Jiraiya's concealed but undeniably present chagrin, the blonde had not tried to get frisky with his fiancés. There was no rule against that sort of thing, since they were soon going to be married to one another soon, but Naruto was not yet sure of the whole thing himself. This was an amusing thing for the young Tsunade, as she was happy that despite the fact that Naruto had perverted traits, he was a gentleman about it, unlike her shameless teammate. Still, even she was wondering just when Naruto was going to do it with his fiancés, if only to find out from them how he did when it came to doing his husbandly duties, as it were. She and Jiraiya would routinely take some time off and be in each other's company when work was not overwhelming them, and she had to admit privately that at least Jiraiya's perversion was good in the bedroom and he had a lot of energy. As well, now that he was made into a young man again by that spell Naruto had overpowered in the past. And at the very least she was not getting any complaints of him from the women in Konoha, showing that he was keeping his promise not to be a pervert now that they were together. It was still a bit new to her, but she was happy that at least she found someone she cared about and who cared about her just as much. It was hard to imagine her and Jiraiya in a romantic relationship, given the number of times she had slugged him for being a pervert. She even reminded him of the time when he used to call her flat-chested when they were in the bedroom, much to his embarrassment as well. Shizune herself was busy with her own work, and while she was not happy when Tsunade skipped work, she did not bother too much, as Tsunade was hard-working when she knew that it was needed. She would also routinely check on Naruto when Tsunade and Jiraiya were busy, and she found it nice to be around Naruto and also the others who made up the people in his home. The days went on, and it seemed that there was going to be a lot of time for Konoha to recover and have some level of peace. But Tsunade, Shizune, and Jiraiya had no doubt that things would change soon enough. They had no idea when that would be, but, as ninja, and with their years of experience, they knew that it was not going to be far behind them. And they were very right. In the tower, Tsunade was looking over the records alongside Jiraiya, as the toad summoning ninja had decided to do some digging around Orochimaru. The two were still busy with their work, and despite the fact that she suspected that Jiraiya had brought some sake again. She appreciated that he was focused on the mission at hand, on not only finding where Orochimaru had gone, but also where his base was so far. There was no doubt now that, while he had attacked with a very fierce army of ninja during the attack, there was no doubt that the village of Hidden Sound was not an actual village. As she pored through the records, she looked to see Jiraiya being intent on reading the reports. She recalled that there were few times Jiraiya was ever serious about something, if it was not his desire to let his perverted ideas run amok. This was one of them, and she spoke to him. "You know, if you were only like this when we were younger back in the day, you would have been a lot more than what you were." Jiraiya looked at Tsunade and smiled a bit. "I know, but then again, if I was serious all the time, you'd wonder where that idiot pervert of a team mate you had disappeared to. I suppose that's true anyway. Any luck on your part?" "Afraid not. The data that I managed to find without being found out only said it was in Rice Country, but you know him. If we find one base, he usually had others to hide it." I asked that young female genin from Sound a few questions, and she said to me that Orochimaru never stayed in one base for too long. Tsunade nodded at that and looked at the reports, but that stopped when Shizune arrived with a group of Anbu with her, and they carried someone with them, definitely not a citizen of Konoha. Tsunade looked at this and was quick to jump into her serious mode as she looked at Shizune. The Jonin assistant of Tsunade quickly replied, "Sorry to disturb you, Hokage-sama, but this man managed to attack some of our people outside of Konoha's walls. He apparently went after Menma with intent to kill. He was stopped by Naruto-kun and Kakashi-san when the two were training a bit earlier." Jiraiya then spoke next. "How are those two?" "They are fine. It was Kakashi who managed to call in the Anbu and had this man brought in." Tsunade and Jiraiya looked at the man and could tell right away that he was a bandit with ninja training, no doubt a missing nin or from a bandit clan. The Hokage then spoke to one of the Anbu. "Get the bingo book and find out if he is listed in the pages from all the countries." "Hi, Hokage-sama." Tsunade then directed her attention to Shizune and spoke. "Get Kakashi over here to report to me what happened in detail." Shizune nodded and left as Tsunade turned to the Anbu who was there alongside the others. "And get Ibiki, as well as Anko. He might be a bandit, but we cannot take any chances. I want to know why he is here and why he was targeting Menma." "Hi, Hokage-sama." It was not long before Kakashi arrived in the Hokage Tower and spoke to both Jiraiya and Tsunade on what had happened earlier. The two listened intently as the Jonin revealed what he had seen and heard when he and Naruto fought the bandit, and once he was done, Jiraiya spoke first to Kakashi. "So this man attacked the people of Konoha first and then went after Menma?" "Yes, Jiraiya-sama, apparently he had done the attack to get our attention and then went to look for Menma and attacked him. I was with Naruto at the time and training with Menma coming along with us when it happened. He recognized Menma and attacked him, demanding why was it that Menma was here in Konoha and not with the rest of the clan, and why did he leave them behind?" "Did you notice anything else about this bandit, Kakashi?" "Yes, Menma revealed some skill in combat while in the fight before me, and Naruto arrived, so there might be some truth that Menma was part of this bandits group due to his combat skill, no matter the fact that it was not refined. And there was something odd as well. It seemed that Menma had some sort of with his ocarina to boost Naruto's chakra when he was fighting the man when I arrived as well. That got their attention as well, but they recalled that Kin herself stated that she was not aware of anyone who in the forces of Orochimaru had used an ocarina before when they spoke to her a few days ago. That was something that could mean that Menma was not a spy or terrorist in Orochimaru's employ. But that did not mean that they were just going to throw away their wariness towards Menma. Kin was a genin after all, and, as such, was not high up in the ranks of the forces under Orochimaru's command. And they knew their former teammate well enough to know that he had many allies who he would no doubt keep secret from the others he had, and considering that he viewed others as mere tools for his missions, then it would make sense that he kept them from knowing all of his plans. The two Sannin looked at one another and began to try and find a viable answer to this mystery that had somehow landed in their laps. This was something of a concern, but until they could get more information from the bandit, they were going to have to wait before committing. That was when Jiraiya spoke once more. "So how is Naruto taking the news?" Jonin replied to that easily. "He's not the least bit happy. I think he's taken a shine to Menma despite some of his own doubts which he confided to me and Fenrix and considers him a good man." Most would say that Naruto is jumping to conclusions, but I know for a fact that Naruto can sometimes surprise people, so he might be right in saying that Menma is not in league with the bandits. The two Sannin knew that to be true, so they decided to take their time, and Tsunade spoke to Kakashi as well. Alright then, I want you to make sure that Naruto is alright, Kakashi, and make sure that Naruto and you keep an eye on Menma. He might be innocent, but you and I, as well as Jiraiya, know for a fact that we have to be absolutely sure before we can make a move. The bandits already in Anko and Ibiki hands, so we should hope that they can get the answers we need. Kakashi nodded and replied. Knowing those two, that would not take too long. It was only after half a day when the answers they were looking for came, and it was only Tsunade and Jiraiya who saw it so far. Apparently the man was part of a very large bandit force that was operating in the DMZ. The actions taken by Orochimaru on Konoha had sparked some serious conflicts near the lands bordering the former land of rice fields, and this man along with the bandits were taking advantage of the situation. They were currently attacking a village which at first was not of value at first glance, but after looking at the data, they discovered that there was a rather lucrative gold mine in the vicinity of the village. The mine was currently unguarded due to it being in a demilitarized zone and was therefore open to all who could take advantage of the chaos, and the villagers who lived in that village had nowhere else to go. They were the ones who mined the gold and were the only ones who knew of the location of the mine and why the bandits had been harassing the village itself. Tsunade looked over this information carefully in order to come to a more focused decision on what should be done. And she decided on a course of action after some time. He looked at the current roster of available ninja and found that Kurenai was available along with Hinata, and the same could be said for Neji and Tenten, as Lee and Guy were not. Guy was busy with Lee's recovery and training, while Kakashi, true to what he had predicted, was on assignment and could not lead the team he normally had command of. Asuma was also on assignment and had his team with him, while Kiba, Shino, and Akamaru were busy on some matters of their own, so they were not going to be around for the time being. Hana herself was busy with some of her duties in the Konoha Veterinary Center, so she would not be there to help. This meant that they were going to have a composite team to handle this mission, and it seemed that she had a very interesting group to send. Anko was also available for work, and thus having 2 Jonin and a few Genin should help. Thus the composite team she had in mind had Hinata, Temari, Kin, Tenten, Neji, and Naruto as the team with Kurenai and Anko as leaders. Anko was the more senior Jonin, while Kurenai would be the junior Jonin as well. It was a rather odd choice for a team, but it was going to have to do for the time being. The team was going to be assembled tomorrow and soon would be dispatched. Their mission was twofold, one to secure and defend the village and the mine if possible, and the second objective was to make sure that Menma was able to finally recover his full memories. This had to be done to make sure that they were ready for anything. In the tower the next day, Kurenai was walking alongside Hinata as the two were talking to one another, the older woman very curious on how her young student and something of a surrogate daughter was doing in her new life, and her being ready for when she was going to be married to the young man that she had loved for a very long time. "How are things with you and Naruto, Hinata-chan?" The Hyuga heiress blushed deeply and twiddled her fingers once more, but she was also smiling as she enjoyed the fact that she was able to be with the one that she loved for a very long time. "It's been alright, Kurenai-sensei, and I am happy that I can be with Naruto-kun. I see, so I suppose that you are getting ready for marriage. You do realize that sooner or later you are going to be in a wedding with Naruto-kun, right?" The young Kunoichi nodded, and her blush was a lot stronger as well, the idea of being married to Naruto and what was to come once the wedding night came. "Hi." Kurenai could not help but chuckled a bit at the way Hinata was blushing deeply and could not help but wished she could give more advice to the young heiress on what she was going to do when she and Naruto were going to have their wedding night. But she knew that now was not the right time for such thinking, as they had a mission to handle. Still, she was curious what it was that Tsunade had in mind, since her team was short-handed since Kiba, Akamaru, and Shino were not present due to other matters. "Hey there, Kurenai-chan." Kurenai could not help but looked to see none other than her friend Anko Mitarashi herself. The 2 Jonin smiled at one another, and Anko could not help but notice the deeply blushing Hyuga heiress and smiled wickedly as an idea came to her mind. She placed that plan in action as she spoke to the young lady. "So Hinata-chan, have you decided to try and get frisky with your Naruto-kun?" The Jonin grinned deeply and couldn't help herself as she spoke again to the young heiress. Hey, if you want we can go and buy more books, or I can teach you a few things on how to wrap your husband around your finger among other things. Kurenai could see that Hinata was blushing to the point that steam was no doubt going to come out from her ears and decided to intervene. She did so by speaking to Anko and made sure to show that she was serious in telling her mischievous colleague that now was not the right time for her to be teasing the young Kunoichi. Anko, that is quite enough, we have a mission to take care of. Anko gave a cute pout to Kurenai and replied. Well, I am going on a mission too, though I have no idea whether I am going alone or with a team. The Hokage was not very clear on the subject. That was when Naruto, Kin, and Temari showed up, as they too were summoned by the Hokage along with Niji and Tenten. This surprised everyone in the hallway as they all proceeded towards the office of the Hokage. It was here that Kurenai noted that Sakura and Sasuke were not around. Sakura was currently working in the Konoha hospital as part of her training as a medic nin, but since Sasuke was medically cleared to work with the team, it was a bit strange to note that he was not around at all. The same could be said for Kurenai as she spoke to Naruto. Where are the other members of your team, Naruto? Sakura-chan's working in the hospital and Sasuke's with Fenrix back in the fortress. Do you have any idea? White Tsunade-san asked us to come here to Kurenai-sensei. The dark-haired and red-eyed Jonin shook her head and replied. I am not sure, but I doubt it's for a social call. We'll find out when we get there into her office. In the training hall. Fenrix looked at Sasuke, who was waiting for him to teach him some new moves, and he had one lesson in mind that would help Sasuke in battle, something that if properly mastered and controlled could be the key in helping him survive the battle that was before him with his brother. As soon as he saw that Sasuke was ready, he took out a sword and spoke to Sasuke. Before I teach you battle techniques, there is one technique that you can learn that is oriented in recovery and defense. This will be the very first technique and will form the basis of what I will be training you in. Sasuke was surprised and spoke. Defense? Why do I need to learn that? Patience, Sasuke, you wish to learn from me, then you must be patient. This is for a purpose. As of today, I was made aware that you possess the ability to use both fire and lightning elements, am I correct? Sasuke nodded. He remembered his promise to learn under Fenrix and decided to watch the Ascendant. Good, now in your land, lightning is normally used for offensive attacks and for some level of defense, but there is more to it than that. This sword is going to be an example. Watch closely, Sasuke. The senior Ascendant cut his own arm, surprising the genin, as he had thought that no normal weapon could ever cut a dragon Ascendant's flesh and skin. Sasuke watched as Fenrix cut his arm again to form an X-shaped pattern on his arm as the blood flowed out from the wound, but it seemed that Fenrix didn't seem to notice. He placed the sword away and walked over to Sasuke and then stopped as he showed the Uchiha his arm. Now this is the technique. The Uchiha watched in amazement as lighting began to arc over the cuts, binding together, and then to his utter amazement, he saw flesh begin to seal itself, blood vessels that were cut begin to grow new tissue and merge into one once more, tissues beginning to fuse back together once more, and, as soon as the flesh bonded together, he saw skin begin to cover the wound, and in mere moments, the once bleeding X-marked wounds were gone. Not a single scar was there at all. It was as if the wound never existed. How did he do that? Fenrix noted Sasuke's shock and replied. What you saw is a technique that uses the energy of lightning to accelerate the body's natural healing process to a higher level. This is what I am going to teach you for today. If you can master this, then you will begin the first step in your desire to avenge your clan and learn the truth of that night. So what say you, Sasuke? Do you think you are ready to learn this technique? Sasuke nodded in dumb wonder. He had seen something that by all rights was impossible. Fenrix had healed that wound without any use of medical jutsu. It was as if he had done the move without an action at all. He then spoke to Fenrix. How did you do that? As I said, there's more uses of lighting energy than just straight out fighting, Sasuke. I will explain to you once you have sat down on the chair. Sasuke looked about and saw no chair until Fenrix made a simple motion and the earth behind him moved and formed into a chair without an effort, and Sasuke sat down as Fenrix spoke to him once more while revealing a diagram of the human body in the same fashion as he had made the chair. What you saw was me using the energy of lightning to augment my body's natural healing, as I have stated. The concept of the technique is simple. The 5 elements in the terms of the human body can be described in this fashion. The flesh and bones are the earth, blood, bile, and the like are related to water, breath is naturally related to air, spirit, and thought is fire, and lastly, the energy that flows through the body is lightning. This technique is a way to allow the natural energy of the body that is tied to lightning to speed up the healing process. It is not involved and does not function in the same fashion as the healing techniques of ninja. This is a way to use the lightning element to increase the body's natural healing process, and it does not use any hand seals, making this a difficult technique to counter since it is not tied to the use of hand seals. Sasuke began to grasp the idea and replied, "It's a concealed healing technique." Correct, however, like all techniques, it is not foolproof and easy to master. You must be able to balance the amount of lightning to make the technique worse. The reason is that your body's cells can only handle a certain amount of lightning energy flowing through them, which is why your body produces only a certain level of electrical energy in its cells. In the use of jutsu that focuses lightning element, you focus your chakra to a certain point through the use of your hand seals to gather the energy of the element. This technique does not use seals due to the fact that you have to mentally control the flow of electrical energy and use it to speed up the natural healing process. Control is the key to this technique. Use too much lighting energy and you damage your own cells and injure yourself badly, and naturally making already present injuries even worse. Use too little and you do not heal faster and leave yourself open to attack, further making your situation even harder than before. Control also applies to the level of injuries that you will suffer. Learn to study the wound and learn how much lightning energy to use in order to heal the wound effectively while not using too much or too little. That is why this technique requires precise control of your body's natural electrical energy flow and how to use the chakra from your lightning elemental affinity, and also excellent understanding of the body's natural healing rates and ability. Fenrich studied Sasuke and, as soon as he was sure that he had the young man's full attention, he spoke. "This is a complex technique and I have not taught Naruto this. I plan to teach him a different variant if, and only if you can master it in your time under me, you will learn more advanced techniques. I will also teach you how to see the truth in the events that led to your current state, and through it, you can make the choices that can give you a future after you kill Itachi." Do you have any questions about Sasuke Uchiha? Sasuke looked at the senior ascendant and he realized that he had just found a good teacher after he had learned much from Kakashi, and he wanted to see if there was any truth in his statements that there was more to what had happened that night. "Just one. When can we begin training?" Fenrich nodded and replied, "You will know when the time comes. I will tell you when the training begins. For now, you have an idea of what to expect from me. I will push you to your very limits, and if you perform well, then I expect you to give me more. And I will teach you something else, something important." "What?" "Knowledge. It might seem and sound simple at first, but knowledge is power. I will teach you how to use it for your purposes and how to use it to shape your future. The future you build will be based on the knowledge you have and how you use it after. The future you build with what you learn from me is uncertain, but it might have three possible paths, one filled with light, another with darkness, or if possible both. Are you ready?" "Yes, I am." Fenrich smiled a bit at that moment and replied, "We shall see, Sasuke Uchiha. You are about to learn ancient secrets thousands of years old and lost in time. We shall see if you are ready. I will see you soon." Sasuke nodded and turned to leave, but Fenrich then spoke. "One more thing I want you to remember is to find a reason to live in the future. It can be anything, an ideal, a mission, a goal, or a person." "What do you mean?" "You will learn on your own time. Or you might find that reason looking at you. Now then, are you ready for my brand of training?" "Yes." "Good, let's get started." Back in the office, Tsunade looked at the assembled team and spoke to them about the soon-to-come mission, while Jiraiya was in the room as well. He grinned at Naruto's direction and even winked a bit at his godson and something of a student, which did not escape Naruto's notice, and he tried his best not to look at Jiraiya, which only served to make the Sannin grin at Naruto even more. Amused thoughts began to fly into the mind of the Sannin as he thought of his student the fourth and the fourth's wife Kushina. "Minato, I might not have turned you entirely into a pervert, but I am going to try my best to make your son into one. Don't worry though, considering the situation he is in now, it's for a good cause." He placed that aside as he recalled telling the young shinobi about the facts of life, but he never had yet gotten to the methods of it just yet. He placed that aside as Tsunade began to explain the mission. You all have been called here to handle a mission pertaining to that bandit attack a day before. Anko, Ibiki, and our interrogators have determined that he was part of a group operating on the demilitarized zone between the Land of Sound and several other nations. As you have guessed, Orochimaru's attack here on Konoha and the Land of Fire in general has stirred up the proverbial hornet's nest. The bandits appear to be attacking a village which seems to be near a lucrative gold mine located in the mountains. This also pertains to the attack on Menma. We need to bring Menma along and hope that he might be able to shed some light on why that bandit attacked him and possibly allow him to recover his memories. Now this might not be the standard number of ninja in a team or the usual setup, but, as you know, we happen to be rather short-handed, so we have to make do. And so far, this team has a very good chance of success. The leadership position shall be between Anko and Kurenai, as Jonin, so they will share joint leadership of the team. Menma should be coming along as well, so as soon as he feels he can come with you, bring him along. Your mission is to secure and defend the village as well as the mine and to see if we can find out why that bandit went after Menma and if there is any truth to what he said about Menma being part of their group. Any questions? Temari then raised her hand. What do we know of the village Hokage-sama? Not much, I am afraid, since it is located in the DMZ, and, as such, there is now solid intelligence there to work with, so in turn data on it is rather sketchy. But since the bandits are there, it is safe to assume that the bandits are raiding the village, no doubt to try and locate the mine since the villagers may know the location. We don't know if the villagers have fought back against the bandits, but we have to assume that they might be doing so. Remember that data is scarce, so don't take any chances, take what you need, and be ready for anything. Jiraiya then spoke to them, as well. I also want you all to keep in mind that we might be operating close to the Land of Sound, so there is a possibility that Orochimaru's Sound Ninja might be operating in the area. There's no way for that to be sure, but getting money for what he will be planning is going to be a possible event due to the chaos going on, and Orochimaru will have agents on the ready for that, even if he needs funds to do his dirty work and get his supplies. If you encounter them, try to capture one or more for interrogation. This might help us locate any place that Orochimaru might be operating from. I know that it's a long shot, but keep your eyes open for any possible opening for it happening either way. And denying him access to the gold mine will hurt him as well, so do your best in any case. Tsunade looked at the team and gave them the order to go and get the mission done. They had a lot to do, and she can only hope that the mission was going to work out in the end, not just for them, but for all involved. Fenrix looked at the young man who was being brought into the fortress and could not help feeling that this young man was filled with a level of promise. It had been some days since Naruto and his team had returned from their mission, and it seemed that things had just changed. The reports came in from Kakashi about the events pertaining to where Menma had come from, and it was rather extensive to say the very least. Menma had apparently once been part of a clan of renegade ninja who were thieves, but he was a morally sound one who was against their tactics and behavior. The proof of it was when he had saved a young girl from being killed by one of his own clan and willingly locked away his memories of the event. But he also went out of his way to atone for his actions and that of the clan he had once been part of. Even to the point of willing to commit suicide to seal the mine and remove any reason for groups to fight over the land. And now it seemed that Naruto had managed to convince Menma that instead of letting himself die or commit suicide, he could still live and use his abilities to do some good in the world. It was not too easy to accomplish, as Menma was still filled with guilt for his actions. But it seemed to have worked, and now here they were, along with Tsunade and Jiraiya in the fortress main hall, as Naruto was petitioning for Menma to be inducted as a citizen of Konoha and a member of the clan. Naturally, Tsunade was still trying to wrap her mind around the fact that Naruto was asking to adopt this stranger into his clan. Still, the blonde Hokage could not help but take it into consideration. The blonde's ability to enhance chakra with the use of his music was interesting and could be helpful. This kind of support could be able to help teams of ninja who were in situations where a boost of chakra was more than welcome when they did not have any chakra boosting supplies that were seriously needed. The suspicions that were aimed at Menma were removed now that the truth of his past was revealed. After a while, Tsunade looked at Fenrix and spoke to the senior dragon ascendant. What exactly is your take on having Menma in the clan? The senior dragon ascendant looked thoughtful, while his student Naruto looked at his mentor and advisor in the ways of his newfound powers and bloodline. He knew that Fenrix was not the kind of person to just welcome anyone, but if he did, then that was usually a good sign, and he personally felt Menma deserved a second chance to live. And he also admitted to Fenrix privately that Menma's abilities in enhancing chakra with his music-based jutsu was something Konoha could find very helpful. Fenrix then nodded as he spoke to Tsunade. I have to agree with Naruto-sama, Hokage-sama. Menma's abilities are rather unique and could be better used by Konoha itself. And since it was Naruto-sama who convinced him to leave his plan of committing suicide and live, it is entirely on Naruto-sama's shoulders if Menma proves to be an ally or an enemy of Konoha. Tsunade looked at the blonde shinobi and clan head that was eagerly waiting for her own decision, and also to Jiraiya and Shizune. They all seemed to be in agreement, and she had already weighed all the possible outcomes and options. This was a good thing in some areas and not in others, but that is the nature of leadership. As a leader, one had to weigh both the benefits and the risks of everything, and also everyone, to make sure that their decisions would be able to benefit everyone and accept the consequences if they were proven wrong in their decisions. She nodded and spoke to Naruto and Fenrix. Very well, I'll draw up the necessary papers and have Menma be briefed on what is needed for him. It might take some time, since he is not a citizen of the Land of Fire, and we will need to assign him a ninja case officer. But if he proves to be loyal to his new home and to his new clan, then I have a feeling that it will work out. The atmosphere that was in the meeting hall finally shifted from worry to elation, and Menma could not help but be relieved utterly at this. He now had a home to go to, and also people who were there for him. Being adopted into a clan was the last thing he had expected for himself due to his less than welcoming past, but he was not going to turn around and say no. Naruto had been willing to stick his neck out for him many times since going back to the village, and knowing that he had redeemed himself in the eyes of the villagers helped him along with what he was feeling. Naruto himself was utterly pleased as he hugged Tsunade in relief, though he made sure to be nice about it since he knew that it could be seen as odd by some. But he was not restrained from saying his thanks to the blonde Hokage, and he did just that as well. Thanks a bunch, Tsunade Heim. The blonde Sanin merely sighed a bit as she hugged the blonde ninja who was becoming more like a son to her and something of a little brother. Sure thing, but remember that, as clan head, just like kin, Menma is now your responsibility, so I expect you to do a good job. Naruto nodded and Jiraiya smirked as he joined them, placing his hand on Tsunade's shoulder and was close to the Hokage as he spoke. Your clan is going to be really interesting in the future, you know that? Naruto nodded while Tsunade sighed a bit more, though she had to agree with Jiraiya in this situation, and smiled a bit at the thought. Who knew just what sort of clan Naruto would be leading in the future, even though it was still up for debate if he should know of his full heritage. She and Jiraiya knew of it, and no doubt a few others, but she decided quickly to let Naruto find out on his own time and terms. As they soon left, Naruto helped show Menma to his room, and soon they began to speak of Menma getting the chance to buy his own clothing, gear, and whatnot, as he was soon going to be a resident of Konoha and part of the clan. Kin was there as well, and she soon began to hang out with Menma, happy to finally have some company while she was here and getting used to a life that was outside of being in the Sound Village. Menma himself was still getting used to everything, so he decided to spend some time chatting with Kin. And it was showing that Kin had found a good friend and perhaps more. Naruto did not mind that in the slightest, as he hoped that his friend and now clansman would be able to get used to being here in Konoha. He also had something else to think about, that being his coming wedding with Hana, Hinata, and Temari, since it was still a bit hard for him to grasp that he was going to get married in the coming weeks. So for now he was going to work on keeping himself busy on any new missions and also get enough training that he can, as both an ascendant and as a ninja. Naruto got his wish as he spent the next few days training with Fenrix, as well as Jiraiya, who made it a point to come back every now and then to the fortress to train his godson. Though he never truly revealed his relation to Naruto, the now young again Sanin was more than happy to make up for all the years that he had not been around. Fenrix was able to help Naruto learn more of his powers and responsibilities as clan head while helping Kakashi train Sasuke. Naruto normally would have not been pleased by this, but the training he got from both Jiraiya and Fenrix was more than welcome. Plus, being around the three women he would soon be married to helped him get used to the idea of finally becoming a married man. Menma and Kin seemed to be alright with one another, which was in his mind a good thing, since they did not have anywhere else to go and were now under his protection. So far on the other side of the spectrum, he was able to get more and more used to having not only a clan of his own, but also his coming wedding. It was still some time away, but at least he was going to make the most of it. Right now though, he was going to be on some personal errands to do, while some new missions were going to come in and get assigned to teams, namely those which included his generation and a few others. While the reconstruction was going well as stated before, the loss of many ninja in Konoha had a manpower shortage, so they had to make do with what they had. The fact that he was now a clan head meant that he could not afford to risk his life with his clan being so new and not yet fully established as it was. He now began to see the hardship that comes with being a clan head, but he sucked it up and continued to work hard for it. For which Tsunade was pleased, and so far it seemed that most of the younger generation ninja were showing greater promise. She disliked the idea of sending them on high-risk operations, but with a number of lost ninja killed in battle with Sana, and also the fact that a number were still in the injured roster even with her around, along with Shizune, the now young again Sannin, and now Hokage was busy doing what she could to keep Konoha strong and also deal with the workloads coming her way. At least Jiraiya was busy helping her out in both giving information and also in the more personal sense. She always knew that he did have romantic feelings for her, but never answered them because she was with Dan, but now well, it was not bad, and despite his perverted tendencies, he did good work. Naruto had recently posted an idea to her, and that was if she could take an apprentice apart from Shizune, which she took into careful consideration and asked him who he would recommend. He thought it over in his usual fashion and suggested Hinata and his still current teammate Sakura, as he recalled that Sakura had remarkable chakra control and Hinata being a Hyuga would have fine chakra control too, as she relied on the Byakugan. Both ideas were actually quite interesting, as she had looked over the data on all the current ninjas and, as such, read up on both Kunoichi in question. 2 days later, Naruto was now happy to be home and, as he got his clothes cleaned, he switched to some regular clothing and soon decided to have some food for lunch. At the moment, Temari was out of the clan compound and going shopping for some clothing of her own, and also she was going to head back to Suna for a bit to check up on her family, while Hinata was busy training with her family back in the Hyuga estate and would not be back for at least 2 days since Hiashi wanted to check on her progress. As for Menma and Kin, the newly inducted Uzumaki clan member was going out to tour Konoha with Kin to get used to his new home, though he was told that he would be accompanied by a Chuunin who was there to keep an eye on him. This meant that the only one with him right now was none other than Hana Inuzuka, who came to her new home to have lunch before she went to the veterinarian's clinic run by her family. Hana smiled at Naruto as he came into the dining hall with the food he had stored in the clan freezer and warmed up for eating. As for Naruto, he hoped to do what he could to get to know the women he was soon going to marry. As they ate their food, Naruto decided to make some conversation with the Inuzuka woman who he was now engaged to. Hana-chan, how long do you plan to be at the clinic? At least a few hours or possibly half of the day, if the workload is heavy for me to deal with for this day, considering that a number of animal summons are in need of annual checkups. But if not, then I should only be there for a short while. Why do you ask? Do you want me to help you out with your workload? I know that might sound strange, and even more so, since I don't have vet experience, but I want to help you somehow. Hana thought about it and smiled. It's pretty nice of you to offer your help to Naruto-kun, and I welcome that, plus it would be a good chance for me to ease my workload. Mom is currently off on another mission last I heard, so I am the only one working there right now. Right after lunch sounds alright to you? Naruto nodded, and he decided to also take the time to chat with Temari and Hinata to get to have some private time with the two of them. It was the best chance he could get to at the very least get to know them a lot more. After all, in a short amount of time, he was going to get married to them. It was not long before lunch was finally over between them, and Hana decided to head out and go to the family clinic to begin her rounds there, and this time she was not going to be alone in doing her work. As soon as he got there, he could easily see that Hana was up to her elbows in work once more, and it amazed him that she was more than willing to go through all of this. So far it seemed that Kiba, Akamaru, Sum, and her own nin dogs were out for their own workloads, as Hana had told him, so it was Hana who was doing the work that they needed to do for the rest of the day. Naruto could not help but look at how Hana was taking care of the canine summons that were under her care. He had always wondered just what Hana was doing in her free time, and now he knew, and he could not help but be impressed by her dedication and skill in treating animals. In his own defense, he was busy helping his wife with the things that she needed to do for the duration of the day, and he knew that Fenrix had told him to get to know the women he was soon going to marry. And this was going to be something that he knew that he had to do, and so far, Hana was the one he was going to be working with. As soon as she was done, the older Inyazuka turned to her husband and asked him to do some things for her. "Naruto-kun, can you get me some supplies from the supply cabinet?" "Hi." Naruto went to do what Hana asked of him and soon got her the supplies that she had asked of him. She went to work on the rest of her day. This was what got the blonde to serve as the woman's assistant for the rest of the working period. Hana's mother and Kiba were overseeing the training of Akamaru and also working together for him and Akamaru to improve their overall teamwork in battle. Once that was done, Hana decided to get some food and drink ready for herself and her husband-to-be, and soon the both of them got the chance to sit back and relax. There were not that many things for them to do now that Hana had done most of her workload for the day as Konoha's veterinarian. "You did really good work there, Hana-chan." Hana smiled at Naruto and replied to that. "Thank you for that, Naruto-kun, and you helped a lot as well. We don't have a lot of help around here in the clinic since we usually are on alert for a mission." "I noticed. Anyway, do you have any plans for the rest of the day?" The Chuunin thought it over and remembered that she had no other work to do for the rest of the day, but she had to make some runs with her own canine familiars since they also were in need of some medical checkups. "Not with the other animals we have here in Konoha, but I need to be checking on my own familiars today, so I will have to work on them for now." "Why are you asking me that question anyhow, Naruto-kun?" The blonde could not help but blush a bit at that, as he did have a reason for it. He had planned to take Hina out to dinner. After all, since they were technically soon going to be married, he might as well use what time that they had left before marriage to get to know one another better. Hana, however, being a woman who had a rather high level of intuition, noted the blush and quickly guessed just what her husband had in mind and smiled at him. "You want to ask me about Naruto-kun?" The blush that he was trying to put aside finally came back in full force on his face as Naruto realized that he was busted. He decided to come clean since lying in front of your wife was not exactly the best way to make a relationship work. "Yeah, I was hoping that when you were done working we could go and Hana smiled and knew that Naruto had not done anything like this before with anyone else, though she knew that he would have asked Sakura had he not been placed into the marriage with her, Hinata, and Temari. She also found Naruto to be a nice guy and she decided to let him have this chance. She decided to use some of the funds she stored away for a rainy day, as it were, and get this going. "Sure thing, let me finish up here and we can go ahead." Naruto smiled and looked very much relieved that Hana had agreed to the whole thing. He had not asked a lot of women apart from Sakura for a date. Sakura and him did not get along well due to her wanting to be with Sasuke when it came to the dating bit. But now he was going out on a date with someone, and Hana was definitely a different sort of person, and he hoped that he was going to do all right. As for Hana herself, she was actually quite interested in going out with Naruto, not merely because they were soon to be married, but because it had been quite some time since she had gone out with anyone, or rather, her first time. Being the daughter of Tsumonzuka was not bad, but her mother had something of a reputation when it came to family, and she would not approve of just any young buck trying to date her daughter. And despite the age difference, her little brother Kiba was no different, as he would usually be a bit of a nuisance when some guys were with her. But she loved her little brother anyway, and did have a way of sniffing out those who were not really interested in her as a person. Naruto was in many ways a nice young man, and truth be told, she found him to be rather cute and personally had no doubt that he would grow into a fine young man someday. And now she was going to be married to the young man who was proving himself to be a good person and also could become prime husband material. Naturally, Hana was soon finished and they headed back to the clan fortress with the young woman going to her room to get dressed while Naruto decided to get dressed as well, and he hoped that this was going to work out for the both of them. As soon as they were done dressing, Naruto met up with Hana and she was dressed very nicely and he could not help but stare. She wore a simple light cream white kimono top with long sleeves, simple light gray pants, and sandals. Simple but classy clothing and an indication of Hana's mindset, simple but classical, clean and straightforward, all of which was actually something that he did not mind at all. As for Hana, she saw him wearing a long-sleeved shirt with a vest, pants, and his sandals. Not exactly up to the standards of a date, but it was all well done, and also something that the two of them happened to be comfortable with. The date between the soon-to-be married couple of Naruto Uzumaki and Hana and Yuzuka went fairly well, and so far, Naruto and Hana were making the most of their time together. Naruto was not used to dating as much, but at the very least he was getting ideas from Jiraiya, who despite his massive perverted tendencies and utter lack of shame was actually giving good dating advice, since he was well aware that this was important. As for Hana, she enjoyed the closeness of the date since her previous experiences were not too good due to her clan affiliation and the reputation of both her mother and little brother. The first thing they did was to go to a movie that Hana was keen on watching, and while Naruto had his doubts, the movie that they watched in the theater, while a bit cheesy, was not too bad. But he made a promise to take her to one of his own favorite movies soon, and she did want to know what movies he happened to like. They also went to the training grounds, where Hana told her husband how she had started out, and there were some funny stories from the elder in Yuzuka that made Naruto smile and laugh. He in turn told her about his very own experiences in being a genin in training. The two enjoyed that, and soon they headed off to have lunch, and while Naruto would have gone for ramen, Jiraiya was more than serious enough to explain to the blonde that it was wise to allow a woman to have her turn to be fair, plus avoiding one hell of a beating later. Hana was however thankful for his willingness to cater to her wishes, even though when they bought their dinner in one of the high-end restaurants in Konoha, she made sure to make it clear that they would split the expenses, half of their orders she would pay for, and he would pay for the other half. Later, as they walked back to the clan fortress, Hana smiled warmly at her husband and began to think on how to best reward him. And one side of her mind was more than willing to provide the female Inuzuka clan member some ideas. She smiled mentally at that and looked at her husband. Sure, she was older than he was, but age was not always a deterrent to a relationship, and she did not have any significant other prior to Naruto, so she was very much in the dark when it came to the more intimate side. But she kept that hidden for now. Time for her to get intimate for a bit with her husband-to-be. They were going to be married soon, so she doubted there was anything wrong for a little fun between them. Plus, it was high time that she had some alone time with him. Temari was busy with some matters of her own, while Hinata was still busy with other matters back in the Hyuga clan estate. And since Temari would a bit late coming home, and Hinata potentially staying in her family home for a few matters to discuss with her father and the clan elders. As they got deeper into the fortress, Naruto escorted her to her room and spoke to her with a smile on his face. That was a wonderful day, Hana-chan. Indeed it was. It was pretty nice to finally get out of the office and be a regular woman every now and then. To be honest, it was something of a first date to me. Naruto was surprised at that and made his confusion clear. Your first date? How can that be, Hana-chan? Hana chuckled and replied. Keep in mind that I am from the Inuzuka clan, Naruto-kun. We are known to be rather fierce, and my mom and her dog Nin are not exactly friendly to those they don't like. So naturally not a lot of guys would like to risk getting on my mom's bad side, even more so her Nin dog and mine as well, since they are like family to me as well. Oh, how about Kiba then? Hana chuckled at that idea and replied. Kiba's okay, and so is Akamaru, but I can take care of myself, Naruto-kun. Naruto chuckled at that, was about to bid her good night, but that was when Hana decided to show that, while she was not as fierce or hot-headed as either her mother or brother, she was still an Inuzuka clan member, and she was not the kind of person to let something she was interested in doing remain undone. And right now she was in the mood for something that they were going to be doing once they were officially married anyway. Naruto had little to no warning as he was suddenly grabbed by Hana and taken into her room. Any attempt to ask what she was doing was soon answered when she began to kiss him deeply on the lips. Naruto's brain was soon hit hard by the sensations, and before he could finally grasp what was about to happen, the Inuzuka clan member locked the door. As they relaxed on Hana's bed, after driving one another to orgasm, Hana smiled when Naruto was next to her and spoke, as she could not help but be impressed by the fact that he was still gifted with a lot of stamina in him. Though she was going to have a lot of fun when they finally got to doing the deed for real after the wedding. And she could not help but wonder just how Temari and Hinata would take this. If this is what I have to look forward to when we're married to Naruto-kun, then I am certainly going to be a very happy woman. Naruto blushed at that and kissed Hana, who smiled at his actions and kissed him right back. And, as soon as they were done, Naruto spoke to Hana. "That was an amazing, Hana-chan." Hana laughed gently at that and replied, "I say the same to you, as well as Naruto-kun." They cuddled for a while longer before finally parting from one another, and while they were indeed interested for another go, they chose not to do so. For now, Hana was in the mood to get some sleep, while Naruto decided to go to his own room. The wedding night was a lot more promising than most after all. The blonde could not help but smile at what happened and decided to use what Jiraiya had taught him on how to be with women in the bedroom when the time came. The next day, Hinata was busy working with cleaning up her room in the compound and decided to take the time to enjoy some peace and quiet, as it was not yet morning and there was time for her to help manage the place before taking her turn to cook food for Naruto, Temari, and Hana. For now though, some rest was in order as she was now done with her work. The young heiress was happy to finally take a break and move to her closet, and, as soon as she got there, she took out a book that had a lot of value to her, namely in the department that she was still very shy about. Kurenai and Anko had insisted that she buy this book that would help her learn how to make her soon-to-be husband and long-time crush happy. She had blushed bright red at the title when she bought the book, and the teasing made by both Kunoichi as well as the Celestlity made her fainting episode more pronounced when she finally got it. But she had accepted the fact that the information was very helpful and the illustrations were rather informative, though she had to fight the urge to blush and faint at the images. How this book was even given the seal of approval to be circulated was beyond her, but right now she decided to read it a bit more and see if there was indeed something here she could use. And right now she was utterly pleased that she had, like in her clan's compound, her own room, and she locked it, since seeing her reading this would have really made quite a lot of people be shocked. Others would have egged her on as well, but for now she read what she could and then got to cooking breakfast. Naruto was still sleeping along with Hana and Temari in their respective rooms, while Fenrix handled other matters. Naruto needed the rest in order to avoid wasting his energy, while the Ascendant would handle some other important matters dealing with Menma being part of the clan. Fenrix, however, spoke that it seemed that there was something brewing between Kin and Menma, though not in a negative fashion according to the man. Hinata herself was curious about that, but decided not to pry as she had other things to deal with. It was over an hour or so later that she finally had enough information on what to do that she made her move to get breakfast ready for the others. Once she placed a book away, she calmed herself and decided to use her Byakugan to see where the others were. And what she saw was very much a good thing in her books when it came to what she wanted to do. Naruto had gone in to take a bath, and with Hana and Temari still sleeping, this left her and Naruto alone in their home who were awake. The idea of being near her husband when both of them were fully naked would have made her blush bright red and faint. But not today, oh no, today Hinata had other things in mind. And now she knew that she had the right moment to strike, and thus she moved to get all of her plans ready for her time with Naruto. If anyone had any idea what was cooking on the Hyuga heiress's mind, they would have been divided into two camps. The first camp being the ones who would be utterly shocked at what the normally shy and modest Hinata would do right now with Naruto. The other camp would be the camp who would cheer Hinata on and go for broke. And the latter was winning, even more so when she managed to sneak out of her room without alerting anyone and soon spotted Naruto going to the bath. That was the opening she needed as she began to remove her clothing as soon as she got into the hot spring room. Earlier, Naruto had decided to go and take a bath in the hot spring since right now there were no pending missions for him to deal with. He was eager to unwind right now and also hopefully get some time to chat with Hana, Temari, and Hinata to see how they were holding up, though he would have to wait for now as two of the women in question were sleeping, and considering the time frame before them, Hinata would also be sleeping, which was a good thing since this equated to privacy. The women in this case had already told him of their plans. Hinata had not told him what she was going to do for the day, as she had no pending missions with Kurenai, Kiba, Akamaru, and Shino. Temari was going to be in a meeting with some of her Suna kindred ninja. Hana, on the other hand, was going into the field since she would be working with her mother on a mission, so she was not around, so he would have to speak to Hinata, but that could wait as he really needed to clean up and maybe later chat with her and see how she was handling the fact that they would soon marry. As he came into the hot spring, he soon lay there and enjoyed the hot water that helped his body relax. He was so deep into the relaxation, but that he had no idea that he was no longer alone there, as he had lowered his senses. The only clue he got was when he heard a gentle woman's voice stuttering. "Hello, Naruto-kun." He opened his eyes and looked at the voice of Hinata Hyuga, surprised that he did not notice that she was there with him right now. His eyes widened at the fact that Hinata was well naked. The word was not that accurate, as she did have a towel on her, but the towel did not hide the fact from the blonde that she was naked. And he could not help but stare at her. Hinata knew that she was taking the right risky move, but it seemed to be paying off as Naruto's full attention was on her. She had to fight the urge to cover herself, as she knew that soon she would be married to Naruto, so being like this before him was not a problem. Of course, that was easier said than done, as every fiber of her modest and shy nature was literally screaming at her to cover up right now. But she fought those feelings down and went back to what she wanted to do with Naruto. "Hinata? I want to join you. Do you want me to wash your back?" Naruto gulped at that, but could not help but enjoy the sight of this happening and decided not to stop Hinata. He was well aware of how shy Hinata was, so this was no doubt taking a lot for her to do, and it was all for him, so he might as well let her dictate the pace here between them. There would be time for him to make his own moves on the Hyuga heiress. Hinata soon sat there behind him and began to use a small bucket to wash his back and then use her hands, which were now covered in soap. Hinata blushed profusely while doing this, but also she could not deny that she was enjoying this moment immensely. She continued with her actions, and she enjoyed the fact that Naruto showed his appreciation of her actions, and she used her Byakugan training and gentle fist training to look for the areas that can help loosen the tension and stress that she felt her beloved had dealing with, not only being a genin of Konoha, but also as head of his own clan. Like that, Hinata-chan. The young woman smiled at that and blushed as she enjoyed the praise of her soon-to-be husband, and that made her all the more convinced to take the plunge. This was confirmed as she soon moved her hands lower, using the pleasure that she had given Naruto in her efforts to move undetected to the rest of her target. She blushed really hard as she continued with her actions, and it was not long before she realized that Naruto himself was also blushing as she was touching his body in an even more passionate way. Soon she finally placed enough of her shyness away and then kissed Naruto on the lips. The Hyuga heiress could not help but feel like she was going to light up as the heat in her body increased as she kissed her longtime crush and now future husband. The heat in her body was so intense that by all rights she would not be surprised if the water started boiling. The heat coming from Naruto's body only added to that. As for Naruto, Lime scene number 2. As they relaxed in the afterglow of their actions on one another, Hinata hugged Naruto and spoke gently to him. "Naruto-kun, that was so good." Naruto was not going to say anything after that experience and smiled warmly at Hinata, though with an obviously impressed glint in his eyes. "Yeah, I had no idea you could be so forward, Hinata-chan." Hinata blushed even more, and Naruto could not help but feel both amused and happy to see his soon-to-be wife look like that. In the past he would have considered Hinata weird and too quiet, but now after getting to know her more, he actually found himself liking her even more. And after this very adventurous moment with her, he had even more reason to find her to be truly someone that he would love being with. He then kissed her on the lips gently, and she moaned at the kiss between the two of them. Hinata soon began to kiss him right back, and he could not help but enjoy the more passionate sight of the normally shy girl. The kiss became more heated between them, and it took a lot of effort for the both of them to part company, as they had much to do in the fact that the wedding day was coming soon for them all. Not to mention a certain bodily need for nourishment, real nourishment made itself known to them, so they had to cut whatever plans they had short. Soon they left the spring and got dressed as Hinata moved to cook breakfast for the others, as well as Naruto and herself. Needless to say, Naruto was amazed at how good Hinata could cook, the same for Temari and Hana, who complimented her, much to the Hyuga's embarrassment and pride. Naruto decided to go out and see if he could get some spare training done, as well as chat up with some of his friends on how things were so far, and also see if there were any missions that he and the others in his team could take. If not, well, training was in order. As for Hinata, she had decided to call on both Anko and Kurenai to have a lunch date. It was fairly forward of her to do this, but she decided that it would be best to talk to the two women on what had transpired between herself and Naruto. She knew that it was going to be a very interesting discussion, how much was still a matter that was up for debate. and she just knew that her sensei and Anko were going to make her blush bright red, but she wanted to go through with this anyway. Later, in one of the restaurants in Konoha, Kurenai and Anko were utterly pleased by what Hinata was telling them. They had invited the young heiress to an early lunch to commemorate her last days as a single woman and to also learn just how far Hinata had come in her relationship. What she told the two kunoichi had them utterly amused and eager for more. The news of what she had said to Naruto weeks before was still fresh in their minds, but this was really bringing home the bacon, as it were. It was taking a lot of their willpower not to tease Hinata to the point she would pass out. That did not mean that Kurenai and Anko were not going to have fun at this, as the soon-to-be-married Hyuga heiress was still blushing and twiddling her fingers. "Wow, you really have come a long way, Hinata-san." "Hi." Kurenai had never seen Hinata so flustered, yet so happy at the same time, and despite herself she decided to tease her adopted daughter and student a bit more. "So have you decided to go all the way? It might be a bit too early since you are not wedded yet with Naruto-san, but I think after that, he won't say no to you now, will he?" That really made Hinata blush hard, and she was amazed that she did not die of embarrassment right there and now, as the idea of finally losing her virtue over to Naruto at this moment was still new to her. Granted, she doubted her maidenhead was intact, since she did tear it in one of her training exercises back in her youth, but that did not mean that the idea did not make her very much embarrassed. Kurenai-sensei. Anko nodded in agreement as well while grinning like mad. "I'll say, you really enjoyed yourself, huh?" Hinata blushed even more and twiddled her fingers while nodding at the question Anko asked her. She really did enjoy every second of it, and it was fairly obvious that both the female jonin were pleased to see the way the young Hyuga was handling the whole situation of her life as a married woman, or rather soon to be married. It was not going to be long before she was going to be married, so this was one way for her to make the most of it. The two decided to stop teasing for now and have their planned lunch as the wedding date was coming ever closer. Kurenai then decided to see how Hinata was handling not being the only woman in Naruto's life. "How are you getting along with Hana and Temari?" Hinata thought about that, and it was easier to talk about Hana first and then Temari, since she had taken time to know them, though she had a more open relationship with Hana since having known her through Kiba. "I am doing fine with Hana-san, since I knew her for a while now thanks to Kiba-kun and Akamaru-kun. Temari-san is alright, and she's actually a very nice person once I got to talk to her about how she is dealing with these things. It's not easy dealing with the fact that we have to share Naruto-kun sometimes, but at least we do get along," Hinata said with a blush on her face, and both her sensei and Anko were smiling at her, though Kurenai was gentle in her smile, while Anko on the other hand was smiling like the cat that was chasing a rather tasty mouse. Though naturally the snake summoning jonin was more of the playful type right now, as she and Kurenai decide to get back to letting Hinata enjoy her time as a single lady before finally the day would come that she would be tying the knot. And once more they decided to see if they could help Hinata on how to make her life with Naruto more interesting. Plus it was also a chance to help her adjust to the current situation a bit more, as she was going to stay a bit longer with her family to prepare for her eventual marriage with Naruto. Hinata would take some time to talk to her father and her sister, as well as her cousin Niji on several matters, since by marrying Naruto, she would need to do all she could to make it work out, even though she had no doubt she had done a lot already. Elsewhere in Konoha, while this was going on, Temari had decided to go and enjoy some alone time for herself and also to get more time to think about her home back in the land of wind. She still missed Suna every now and then, but at least was pleased to know that it was in good hands, and at least Gaara was doing his best to change things for himself in the path he chose to one day become Kazekage. The idea of her little brother being Kage was interesting, and it seemed that Gaara would indeed prove himself to many. There was no doubt in Temari's mind that it was not going to be an easy path, however Gaara had a lot to get past and prove to all of their villagers. But she had to admit that she had begun to have faith in her little brother, and she would be pleased to see him reach such a lofty goal. In a way, this made her interest in the blonde ninja she was soon to marry a lot more appealing. After all, she had no doubt that he was the one Gaara approved of, and at least she began to develop an affection for the blonde who was her brother's only known friend. Still, she was curious on how things would be when she got intimate with him, since she knew that it was going to happen once the wedding day came. She might be blunt and honest, as well as the tough girl at heart and a fiercer kunoichi of Suna, but Temari was still a woman at heart and had heard all manner of gossip over the years. She knew that sooner or later it would happen, and she wanted to make sure that she got some idea of what it would be like to be with guys. And it was not easy for her since not only was she the daughter of the Kage Suna, but had Kankuro and Gaara as her brothers. She was the eldest to be sure, but still she was plagued in a sense by having overprotective brothers, though it was only much later on that Gaara became more open, so to speak. As for her new husband-to-be, she had to admit that she was very curious on how time would be for her and him, as well as Hinata and Hana. She learned after some time that Hinata had been very much in love with Naruto for a long time and found that interesting. And he had gotten to like the Hyuga heiress, as she was actually a nice person and had shown great courage in the invasion long ago and also now. Hana was interesting and certainly the kind of person she would peg to be a big sisterly type like Hinata's sensei as well. Made sense there, since she acted like the den mother of the group, though it seemed that slightly more domestic skills were more up Hinata's alley. As for Naruto himself, he began to think on what happened between him, Hana, and Hinata, and he was very much happy to have done that, and now he began to think of the only other member of his soon-to-be formed family he had not been intimate with, and that was Temari. Of course, despite his hormones and his own inner perverted streak, Naruto was smart enough to know that he should not go forward and get to work on getting to know Temari more. She was Gaara's sister after all, and one of his few friends outside of Konoha, and the last thing he wanted was to do something that would sour relations between him and Gaara, which naturally would sour relations between Konoha and Suna. Nevertheless, the idea of him and Temari being intimate was very hard to ignore, and he decided to at the very least make some time for her. After all, he had made time for Hana and Hinata, so there was nothing wrong with him doing the same with Temari at some point in time. The two blondes would soon meet one another once Temari was done with her own meeting with her fellow Suna ninja, and Naruto had decided to find her and see how she was doing. "Hello there, Naruto-kun, how are you?" "I'm alright, Temari-chan, how about you?" "Alright, I just had a meeting with some of my fellow Suna ninja, so, what do you have in mind?" Naruto pushed forward the idea of them going out on a short trip around Konoha tomorrow morning in the early dawn, so she would be able to do the proper exploring before the day became fully active, and she decided to do so in agreement. Naturally, they decided to head back to the fortress and get some rest and spend time with the others before going out on the outing the next day. And they did just that, as well as Temari, Hinata, and Hana got into a discussion about what was to come in a few weeks, though she was not told that her soon-to-be. The next day, as soon as they woke up and had breakfast with Hana and Hinata, they took the time to train dressed for their little outing. Naruto was still feeling the effects of his time with Hinata, as well as Hana the previous days, and he was thankful that his body had recovered well, and naturally that made him begin to have thoughts in an oh-so-different direction. But he decided to put those thoughts aside for the time being and get to know Temari more and let her do the same. As soon as it was over, Hana was off to her workplace, while Hinata had mentioned that, since she was on a mission with her team and Kurenai, she would be out for a while. Both nodded, and Naruto wished Hinata and Hana the best of luck, with him kissing Hinata on the cheek and doing the same to Hana, showing a more openly affectionate side to himself. That literally made Hinata blush like a tomato, but at least she did not faint right away like before and relish that. Hana merely smirked in a good way and planned to kiss him back when she got back from her duties. As for Temari, she decided to get herself from clean clothing once she was done taking a bath and freshening up. Using up water excessively was not liked in Suna, since despite having access to a large spring and underground water tables, they were in a desert land after all. So here, she was willing to indulge this moment since this was now her home. She was done, and unlike the last time, she wore a set of clean clothes that was more in line with her tastes, which was simple and comfortable, but light and mobile clothes. She thought of taking her fan with her, but decided to leave that alone for now, since she had no doubt that she could handle herself, and with Naruto around, it would be all right. She soon got her hair in her usual style and soon met with Naruto, and they decided to go out and make the most of their time together. Temari and Naruto were able to go to some of the other places in Konoha that they had not visited yet, and she did take a liking to some of the places in Konoha, making her feel a bit more guilty in a sense for having participated in the attack on the village when Orochimaru had taken her father's place as Kazekage and launched his invasion of the place. She mentioned that to Naruto, and Naruto naturally spoke to her about that as they moved to a nearby park. "Look, Temari-chan, I understand that you still feel some guilt about what happened, but you didn't know about it, and if I recall it right, you did say that you did oppose the idea, even if you still went through with it. Thanks, my father before he was killed always cared for the people of our village, even though he might not have shown it to Gaara. I always suspected there was some reason behind it, but I never asked, nor did I do so since back then. Gaara was still very much filled with anger towards everyone, even you? Yes, I will also admit that I was not much of a sister to him then, since I was also as afraid of him as everyone else. Well, at least you have a chance to mend fences with Gaara. I never had much of a chance with my family since I was an orphan. Temari gave a nod of sympathy. She had taken time to know Naruto more and had to admit that his life was hard by many standards, and she could admire his tenacity and will to survive quite easily, as she knew that he had to fight for everything he had from the get-go, and she respected that very much. They talked a bit more before heading back to the fortress, and it seemed that things between Temari and Naruto were a lot better than most. Naturally, as time passed, Naruto decided to take the initiative and gently kissed Temari on the cheek, nothing too forceful, since he knew from what he had learned that one had to let the woman take the lead, especially in something like this. The blonde Kunoichi was a bit taken back, but did not try to take his head off, and then smirked a bit, as she actually did not mind the attention. And in that moment she decided to reward her fiancé's initiative once he was done with the kissing bit. It had been the very first time she had ever been kissed by a boy who she did not have to worry about, and the fact that Naruto was being this bold, yet respectful with her was making her have some so interesting thoughts of her own. And she was now going to let those thoughts loose. Lime scene number 3. After they took the chance to relax after the close stint, Temari moaned a bit more and then spoke with a smirk on her face. You know, if you were not as trusted by Gaara like you are now, and I finally got to see how good you are as a person, you would be in real trouble. Naruto gave a look of embarrassment at the truthfulness of that statement. I guess I am going to make sure I don't disappoint. Temari smirked and kissed him gently on the lips and replied. After that rousing performance? I doubt I would be disappointed one bit. And besides, while I was not sure about this whole marriage thing right off the bat, I changed my views after getting to know your people more, and you in particular. I guess this little romp has served us well for now. Can't imagine what it's going to be like when we finally get to it, huh? Naruto blushed at that, and Temari laughed gently at the reaction, since she found the fact that he was still shy after being able to have brought a lady to such a wonderful release very amusing and yet endearing at the same time. She then enjoyed the closeness while they were on the couch for a bit more before they finally decided to get dressed and make the most of the days left to them. They would soon be going to the wedding arrangements as the day came closer to them all. Once they were fully dressed, the blonde Kunoichi decided to kiss him once more and in a very potent fashion as Naruto felt her use her tongue again. And he did not bother to resist her actions at all. They were going to be married soon enough, and that was the best thing to happen thus far. Once they parted, Temari headed out to go to a meeting with some of her fellow Suna ninja to fill them in on the coming wedding and who she would ask to represent her village in the marriage. Already there was no doubt that Gaara and Kankuro would arrive, as they were now the family she had the most with their father's death being confirmed. It was a hard thing to know that their father was now dead, but at least they had repaired their relationship with Konoha and would do their best not to let what Orochimaru did to them happen a second time. The fact that Orochimaru had indeed slain their father only added to the whole deal, and she hoped that all things would work out in the end. As for Naruto, the blonde could not help but whistle like mad and smile all the while after what he had just experienced with Hinata, Hana, and Temari. Granted, it was not full-blown action, as his perverted sensei would call it, but it certainly was worth being happy about. He had to admit that perhaps getting married was not going to be too bad, though he was mature enough now to know that a real marriage took time to work, and also it needed communication and compromise. And he was certainly going to give all that he had to make it work. As he continued, he was suddenly greeted by none other than Jiraiya, as the now young again Sannin gave him a look of curiosity. Hey pervy sage. HMPH, impudent, as ever, how are you Naruto? Okay, I guess I should thank you for all those lessons you drilled into my head. Oh? That's a first for me to hear from you of all people. So, fill me in then Gaki on what reason you have for saying that to me. In the Hokage Tower later on. Tsunade was currently looking over the latest reports when Jiraiya came into the room and had a smile on his face, making the young again female Sanin raise an eyebrow at the way her teammate, confidant, and loved one was acting. Though it was not in a bad way, since seeing him happy was something she did not mind seeing. "Alright Jiraiya, what's with the happy face? You better not have been doing that research thing again." Jiraiya smirked a bit more and replied. "Honestly, I would have Tsunade Heim, but not right now. It seems my godson is finally becoming more open to girls, and our teaching him is paying off." Tsunade was even more curious about that. "Care to explain?" Jiraiya did so, and soon Tsunade could not help but feel some level of amusement towards Naruto. Jiraiya had been keeping tabs on Naruto and saw that he was getting a lot more affectionate with Hana, Temari, and Hinata, and not just a regular kind of affection either, but the more physical type of affection. That made Tsunade smile as she finally spoke to Jiraiya. "I see, at least he is making an effort to be affectionate. But mind you, I will not have you infecting the young man with the pervert disease." Jiraiya gave Tsunade a mock-offended look and replied. "Now that is uncalled for Tsunade Heim. I am merely a man who does not hide his appreciation for the female form, unlike those who pretend not to be interested in women, but look when women are not looking. And I do admit I am a super pervert, but don't forget our sensei was one himself, and at times I thought he was more perverted than I was." Tsunade sighed at that. She might not have shown it, but she was aware of Saratobi's own perverted tendencies, but at least Saratobi did know when and where to show his perverted side, meaning he was subtle in his antics. Unlike Jiraiya, who was more than willing to show his perverted side every chance he got. "Yes, but I will not have Naruto become too much like you. Kushina and Minato will not be too happy with you if you do that to their son." Jiraiya chuckled at that and replied. "I know that, but as far as I have seen, Naruto himself has a perverted streak which I can tell is all his own, considering the fact that he has a penchant for using that jutsu of his that turns him into a girl. I never did figure out just where he got the inspiration for that jutsu of his, but I can tell you, only the most mentally disciplined men, or those who find older women more attractive, can resist it." Tsunade shook her head at that and replied. "I suppose, but try not to turn him into you too much." "No promises there, Tsunade. Anyway, on another related topic concerning the kid, when is he supposed to be married?" "A week from now. I take it we're going to be calling a priest for this, as well as stand in for Naruto's parents?" "If it comes to that, yes, but that's up to Naruto himself, if he does not mind having us as godparents, though technically you are his godfather after all." Jiraiya became solemn at that and nodded. "I know, and truth be told, I was not the least bit pleased I missed out on nearly 12 years of his life. If I had only come back here earlier to help him, he would have been better off. But I can't complain in the sense that he has grown up and got stronger on his own. I have no idea how he would react if he knew he was Minato's kid. He idolizes the Hokage after all, and to find out about his dad being the fourth and being the one to place the Kyuubi into him, well, I am not sure how it will turn out." Tsunade nodded at that. She knew why Naruto's parentage was never revealed, but it hardly meant that she liked it. The young scamp had grown on her, and she technically was his relative, and right now was the closest thing he had to a blood relative in this world. Jiraiya soon turned a bit more serious as he thought about the next step in his plan to be more active with Naruto's growing up years, as well as spend as much time as possible before he went out to track down Akatsuki. He deserved to help the boy who was his godson, and he owed it to his parents to make him the hero they felt and knew him to be. And he too felt that the blonde would be more than merely a hero, and this gift he got would only help in the process. Maybe, but we both know Minato well enough to know he would never do this without a good reason. The same for Kushina. Do you remember how it was for Minato when he found out Kushina was pregnant? Jiraiya smiled. First time I ever saw the genius get all tongue-tied, misty-eyed, and nervous as hell at the same time. Good times. Tsunade smirked a bit, and Jiraiya recovered from his thoughts and spoke. I'm going to do my best to teach him Tsunade Heim and make sure that he will be able to be the hero that his parents hoped he would be. And yet be his own person to face the challenges that will come his way. And at least Fenrix is around to make this whole situation that he is in right now going to be a bit easier to deal with, even more so with Naruto's newfound powers. As for me, I guess I am going to have a field day with being the godfather to him. Tsunade smirked at that and then spoke. You know, I guess I should get ready for the possibility that the brat is going to ask me to be godmother or something. Though to be honest I doubt I would be that good an influence considering my bad habits." Jiraiya shook his head at that comment from his teammate, Hokage, and loved one. He had no doubt that Tsunade, despite her bad habits, which were pretty bad, she was a good person overall, and despite her tough lady attitude, she was the kind of woman who would risk life and limb to protect those she cared for, and with Naruto reminding her of two important people in her life and her only living blood relative thus far, she would be the right person for him to have as a godmother. After all, even with her temper, strength, and naturally her left hook, she did have a soft side to her and was far more caring than most would ever see. Don't sell yourself short, Tsunade. You do have bad habits to be sure, but you do have good traits, and I can bet you are going to be happy to have you as family. After all, you technically are both related, so you are pretty much the closest thing to a mother figure that the blonde can call on. And like I said, bad habits aside, you are a good person, and I doubt anyone can argue that side of you. Anyone who does is either blind or has a death wish." Tsunade smirked and nodded. She used to think that Jiraiya would not be the smart one in the team in the past. But it seemed that her previous assessment was no longer that accurate, and she was thankful for that, as she had no doubt that he was going to be a strong ally in the long run against all the enemies inside and outside, as well as someone she grew to love. Danzo being one of them, there was no way she was going to let Danzo get his talons on Naruto's clan and the children who would be born in the blonde's clan. She knew Danzo's mindset fully well, and she was not going to let it happen to Naruto or his children, her god kids. Danzo's pragmatic stance may work on occasion, but it could also backfire at some point in time, and she was in no mood for it to come back and stab Konoha in the guts. She may not be aware of all of his activities, but she heard rumors and half-truths. She normally did not put much faith in the two, but with Danzo it was a different story altogether, and her own experiences with him led her to be very wary of him. She then directed herself to dealing with all the remaining medical cases left in the village's hospital. The cases that required her talents were going to be where her focus was, along with Shizune, while the easier cases were delegated to the rest of the Konoha medical teams. Rock Lee was going to be the one that she had worked with the most, as a favor to Naruto and to Guy himself. "I guess then I should get to work on preparing some medical treatments for the injured shinobi while I was gone for so long." Jiraiya nodded and spoke next. "I'll head out and check up on Gaki and see how he's handling his soon-to-be married life. Though I can bet that I am going to be busy since he will be wed next week. I need to make sure that he will have to have a bachelor's party soon. It's going to be his last time as a single man after all." Tsunade gave Jiraiya a look that he knew spoke only one phrase: "Don't go overboard." To which Jiraiya gave only a knowing smile. And that made Tsunade sigh, as she knew that what she said was going to fly off the head of her now young again teammate and loved one. The now fully young again blonde Sannin could not help but wonder just what the white-haired pervert had in mind for their godson. As for Sasuke was now finding out that Fenrix was dead serious about training, which was why he was now with the Descendant, and they were not alone. Kakashi was with them, and he was making sure to watch the progress of the young Uchiha who was one of his students. Instead of being told off by the senior Ascendant, the Jonin was asked to stay and observe, as well as train Sasuke alongside the Ascendant. Kakashi was quite surprised to see that Sasuke was now taking his training a lot more seriously, but that only lasted for a while, as he worked on doing all that he could to make sure that he kept his promise to train Sasuke. So far he was doing well in turning the Chidori to the more potent Trakiri and was taking into the use of more advanced fire jutsu, which would prove potent for him in the battles to come. As for Kakashi, he vowed to personally work on teaching not just Sasuke, but Naruto, as he knew that sooner or later, he would be training Naruto, as he was his student. The white-haired Jonin looked at Sasuke, who was currently trying to fight his Kage Bunshin, while Fenrix was also attacking him with some weights on his body. The weights were not in the same league as Rock Lee's own weights, but the fact that he was being hit on all sides by Fenrix and the Kage Bunshin made the weights feel a lot heavier than they were. Kakashi began to see that Sasuke was trying to find the energy he needed to win, but at least his seal on the cursed seal was doing its job in containing the power there. Sasuke dodged a powerful blast of fire from Kakashi and quickly avoided a powerful kick from the Jonin, and he was forced to evade another powerful diving fist from the senior dragon Ascendant that caused the floor to break apart. The raven-haired Uchiha youth was bringing all of his skills to bear in this fight along with his jutsu, and he was not going to make the mistake like before to underestimate his foes, even if they were Kage Bunshin. He thought about what he had seen and was more than willing to go all out to learn, and the story of the snake that ate its own tail also had an effect on him. It was not hard for him to know what the story's meaning was, and, as he thought about it more, he began to see that he should at least try and find other paths that led to power but did not lead to his destruction. He recalled long ago that he had promised to one day revive the Uchiha clan, and he knew that the goal would never be truly met if he died. Thus he had to be stronger, but not in the way his brother wanted him to follow. If Fenrix could train him to be more capable and more, then he would do it. Plus he began to wonder deep in his mind if there was indeed a lot more to what happened that night so long ago. Itachi stated that he wanted him to be stronger so he could take his eyes, and, as he thought about that, it made sense that Itachi would want to have his eyes when they fully matured, but there were still things that made no sense to the young Uchiha. And he had no intention of letting himself be in the dark forever. Whatever secrets lay behind the massacre, he would find it, and after that, only time will tell. The end. Thanks for watching my video. Leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. If you want the next part of this story, let me know in the comment box. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.